Let the last ember glow, let the room exhale, and follow the whisper through the keyhole. Subscribe, ring the bell, and the next chapter opens. You wake before the rooster even considers ruffling his feathers, the pre-dawn chill clinging to your timber-framed walls like a second skin. A haze of candle wax, wet straw, and last night's onion stew lingers in the room, weaving itself around your lungs as you stretch on a mattress that is mostly hopeful hay in a tired sack. At 30 you are lauded as seasoned, an elder in training, and, if fate so wishes, only one enthusiastic infection from well-earned retirement. Robes first. Thick wool, dyed the sober shade of learning, drapes your shoulders with the confidence of someone who can pronounce phlegmatic on command. A broad felt hat crowns the ensemble, less to flaunt knowledge than to hide the mystery of multiplying boils. For treasured books, 2 actually read, 1 skimmed during a thunderstorm, and the last kept for the smell of vellum, stand sentinel by the door. They whisper in Latin that you are undoubtedly a physician. Your medical satchel joins the dawn parade, its leather belly jingling with knives, dried herbs, and the faint hope no one will ask you to diagram a kidney. Credentials? A luxury for future centuries. In your world, fluency in goblet Latin and the confidence to declare a man cured after he vomits in 4 directions are the only letters after your name you'll ever need. Breakfast is a heel of yesterday's bread softened by weak ale, safer than the water, and the reassuring thought that bad air, sinful habits, or Mars in the wrong celestial parlor will cover any professional surprises. The village lane greets you with mud, gossip, and your first appointment. A warm clay jar of urine presented with reverence usually reserved for relics. You lift the goblet to dawn's meager light, swirl it like a sommelier of sickness, and inhale with scholarly gravity. Welcome to uroscopy, where 16 shades of yellow compose an entire diagnostic symphony. Pale as straw, commendable balance. Deep orange, liver lamentations. Murky brown, hot bile or heavenly displeasure. Blue, witchcraft without debate. Bubbles? Either death's invitation or a convenient warning to inspire repentance. For thoroughness you pass the sample near a candle, coaxing the humors awake like soup before supper. Then note findings on a wax tablet in looping Latin few, including future you, could easily decipher. The patient awaits verdict. You nod with gentle gravity, declare their choler inflamed and spleen melancholic, advise the avoidance of figs, loud disputes, and women named Agnes. A cloth pouch of time, a leech for companionship, and a bronze talisman change hands. They depart both worried and strangely comforted, certain you hold secrets that could, theoretically, save them. Your day unfolds in variations on that theme. A child's toothache earns a polite pint of bloodletting. A merchant's melancholy meets a tincture of wormwood and whispered psalms. When a rash refuses to yield, you blame corrupted air or perhaps envy lurking in the neighborhood well. Remedies that require only distance and prayer. Should outcomes sour, you retreat behind incense smoke and measured sighs, assuring families that earthly failures often cloak divine lessons. Yet beneath the pomp and pungent poultices, a different rhythm thrums. Each time you press an ear, untrained though it is, against a laborer's chest or watch fever tremble through a widow's hands, you sense the edge of revelation. You realize your art is less about certainty than presence. The robe, the gaze, the story that pain will pass. You loan courage as much as cures, and to eyes woozy with fear, that courage tastes sweeter than any herb. As dusk paints the thatched roof's bronze, you trudge home, fingers smelling of sage and iron. Lamps flicker alive inside, chasing shadows into corners where your doubts curl up to listen. You tally the day's miracles. 1 boil drained, 2 spirits lifted, 3 excuses unchallenged. Not a single stethoscope in sight, yet somehow the village still breathes. Before bed you open the least dusty of your volumes, lips shaping syllables of Hippocrates you only partly grasp, and feel a quiet kinship with every healer who ever walked into mystery armed with little more than hope and a handful of stories. Tomorrow will bring fresh jars, fresh fears, fresh chances to pronounce phlegmatic with flourish. You will greet them all in your long robe, pockets brimming with knives, time, and the audacity to believe you help. So, Gentle listener, as your own room darkens and the hum of a distant fan mimics evening wind through medieval lanes, rest easy. History's roads are textured with imperfect guardians like you. People who meant well, guessed boldly, and loved the world enough to keep trying. Let that knowledge be your lantern tonight. Close your eyes, breathe in curiosity, and drift toward dreams where even the clumsiest remedies can spark a little wonder. You lean closer to the crackling hearthlight and study your next visitor with the calm air of someone who believes the universe is ruled by 4 secret currents: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, each one forever wrestling for the upper hand inside a person's ribs. Bacteria, viruses, those whispers belong to centuries yet unborn. For you, a human being is a simmering broth of competing juices, and your calling is to make sure no single flavor overwhelms the pot. Anger and a crimson flush? Too much blood. A neat solution, remove a little. Fatigue and ghost-pale cheeks? That's phlegm gone rogue, perhaps coaxed forth by cold food or the foul influence of a neighbor with questionable morals. Yellow bile raises its head in irritable tempers and sudden vomiting. Black bile skulks in shadows, masquerading as nightmares, forlorn poetry, and the heavy fog of grief. Your medicine is half plumbing, half sermon. Adjust the pipes, warn the soul, then charge a fee. You prescribe opposites with unwavering conviction. A body that feels hot and damp should meet cold, dry fare. Sage simmered in goat's milk, drunk while facing the sunrise. If the complaint is chilled and sluggish, why, fire and spice shall answer. No 2 physicians agree on the exact dosage of bile to bleed away, but disagreement only deepens the mystique. You cushion the gaps in knowledge with phrases like humoral disquiet or temperamental flux, smoothing panic into awe. Should a patient fail to recover, blame lies with Saturn's sulk, a life of vice, or the stubborn dampness of the local air. Never with your impeccable reasoning. When the mind wanders to fevers, headaches, or unsettling dreams featuring squealing hogs, one answer triumphs over all. Open a vein. Dawn has scarcely lifted its rosy eyelids before your binding arms, whispering Latin over linen and setting blade to skin. Blood is, after all, hot and moist. If your sufferer is too hot or too moist or merely too loud, a measured outflow should restore cosmic symmetry, or at least usher in blessed quiet. Your tools follow ancient maps inked by a confident 12th century monk. This vein for the liver, that one for the spleen, another for a hump of ill temper lodged behind the eyes. A tightened cloth coaxes each vessel upward like a red string from beneath parchment skin. One swift slice, a wobbling assistant, and the vivid ribbon of life spills into a ceramic bowl. There is no strict quota, only the alchemist's instinct that tells you when the complaint has ebbed, or the patient's eyelids begin to flutter. Some colleagues claim to read destiny in the slick thickness of the flow. You nod as though you can, too, inhaling with scholarly gravity before discreetly turning aside. Leeches wait in their damp jar for moments when your own hands feel too direct. They fasten, drink, and drop away in silence. Model students of the healing arts. When the bleeding ends, you wrap the wound, pass your patient a draught of weak ale, strong drink breeds reckless bile, and urge gentle activity. Lest sloth invite fresh phlegm. Should they totter home, you proclaim them better. Should they swoon, you announce a successful purge. Should they perish, their request simply came too late for earthly remedies. With the morning's crimson duties complete, you wipe your palms across wool or apprentice, whichever is nearer, and ready yourself for the true harvest of the day. House calls beyond the village mud. Peasant cottages offer heartfelt gratitude paid in turnips and promises. Manor halls deliver coin, flattery, and candlelit suppers where someone invariably coughs into embroidered napkins. Into your satchel go jars of unguents, bunches of rue and rosemary, and knives polished to a moonlit sheen. Presentation is everything. You tug your velvet hat higher, letting its shadow lengthen your stature. Your robe, heavy as a cathedral door, swings with deliberate majesty as you cross the threshold of polished oak. A nervous servant ushers you inside, eyes drawn to the clinking bag that suggests both salvation and danger. Hallways smell of beeswax and whispers. Somewhere behind embroidered drapes, A noble languishes between pillows, certain that your arrival means destiny still favors their heartbeat. You pause just long enough for anticipation to bloom, then stride forward with steady breath, candle flame reflections dancing in your eyes. Tonight, while your listeners drift towards sleep, the echoes of your footsteps remind them that history's healers did not only battle illness. They mastered theater, wielded faith, and carried stories potent enough to lull even modern minds into dreaming. So let the crackle of the hearth mimic a distant forest, the soft hum of your fan become night wind over stone walls. Feel your pulse settle into the steady rhythm of balance restored. Tomorrow, troubles may rise with the sun, but for now you float on the gentle certainty that somewhere, beneath layers of time and legend, a robed physician tends the ancient fires, keeping watch through the hours, guiding you safely into slumber's hush. ChatGPT, you step into the manor's dim hallway, where the air tastes of beeswax, damp stone, and whatever has simmered too long in the kitchen cauldron below. A maid swoons quietly against the wainscoting, an omen no one bothers to note, for they've bigger worries tucked behind brocade curtains. In the bedchamber, a noble lies beneath tapestries of hunting stags, foot swollen, brow burning, faith resting squarely on the jars clinking at your side. You begin the sacred dance of questions. What meats cross their lips? What baths, if any, grace their skin? And whether Mercury has barged into Saturn's orbit lately. 5 contemplative heartbeats by the fire lend your words gravitas before you proclaim an imbalance. Most certainly bile, though you gently hint at darker forces should symptoms bloom louder on Sundays. A poultice of powdered snail shell and crushed mint sounds convincingly precise. You forbid cold winds, red flesh, and strenuous thoughts, then prescribe bed rest with the solemnity of a royal decree. Before parting, the lady of the house slips silver into your palm. Silent testimony that knowledge wrapped in velvet speaks louder than holy water flicked in haste. You warn that swelling which creeps upward requires your swift return. Swelling that sinks demands a priest's consolation. Either way, their fate appears shepherded by your say-so. Your satchel, that portable cabinet of possibilities, groans on its leather hinges. You swing it open like a conjurer revealing miracles. Knives, some keen, others obstinately dull, gleam beside hooks meant for errant teeth and splinters of mystery. Saws lurk for grim amputations. Cautery irons promise to close the story with sizzled finality. Trepanning drills hunch together like gossiping ravens, eager for skulls haunted by wicked spirits. A jar of leeches twitches in anticipation, each creature christened under your breath, though you swear never to grow fond. Pouches rustle with powders and unmarked herbs. Ground antler, dried lizard tail, a stone that might settle a stomach or summon a rash, memory will decide. A urine flask doubles as both diagnostic chalice and steadfast paperweight. A battered astrological will completes the ensemble, ready to blame Venus for any swelling too delicate to describe aloud. Soap and pristine bandages reside only in theory. The cloth swaddling your blades hasn't met water since the last great pestilence. If anyone notices the dried maroon on steel, you murmur relic of a blessed martyr, and watch reverence eclipse doubt. Authority secured, you turn skyward. The horoscope unfurls across your mind like a cosmic chessboard. Aries guards the head, Pisces the feet, and every organ in between bows to some glittering sign. A stomach ache beneath a Virgo moon? Dire tidings for the patient. You fold your arms, gaze at the rafters, and mutter about Mercury loitering near their liver. Stars, you explain, push and pull the body's 4 sacred tides. Mars stokes fevers, Saturn rains melancholy. Venus swells limbs and stirs faint scandals at family tables. Timing is no idle ornament. You would never set blade to vein beneath a waxing moon, lest fainting fits and marital quarrels multiply. And heaven help the woman who labors during a solar eclipse. Legend insists her child will greet life limping but full of fierce opinions. With a final tilt of your hat you depart, boots echoing through the corridor as sleepy minds behind bedroom doors weigh hope against superstition. Your tools clatter a lullaby of knives and iron, leech glass tapping a sleepy rhythm. Somewhere beyond the window, the night sky unfurls its silent scroll, planets gliding like candle flames on ink-black velvet. An eternal chart assuring you that every fever, every tremor, every whispered prayer can be traced to a star's slow heartbeat. So breathe evenly now. Let the hum of your own room blend with distant hooves in castle courtyards and the soft flutter of tapestry in medieval dusk. Know that in another age, beneath another roof, you kneel beside a smoldering hearth, balancing humors, bargaining with constellations, and stitching wonder into the waiting dark, guiding listeners gently toward dreams where history's lantern glows warm and steady through the deepest night. You trace the neat circle of your astrolabe with a thumb, letting candlelight glint off its copper rim while your patient's family waits, breaths held tight as purse strings. They want certainty, you offer constellations. Their shoulders relax the moment you murmur that Mars, not moldy rye, is to blame for the stabbing pain beneath that swollen shoulder. A little cosmic intrigue always feels kinder than confessing they ate bread laced with fungus again. You jot birth hour, rising sign, and the precise moment the sufferer first sneezed 3 nights prior, vital coordinates you insist, for explaining why hot bile now pools behind the clavicle. Your phlegm drags heavy, you pronounce. Because Venus lingers in a damp quadrant this week, no one, including you, can decode the phrase, yet coins clink into your palm as though revelation itself has walked the corridor. Cloaked as a celestial cartographer, you stride away armed with a compass, a stub of candle, and the unwavering faith of the sick. Soon enough, the manor echoes with sharper cries. The swelling has soured, scents of stewed onions drifting from the wound, and urgency drags you back. Today is surgery day, not because a favorable moon smiles, but because desperation finally drowned hesitation. You spread your tools on linen, the cheese knife promoted to scalpel, a bone saw nicked with old victories, a rag steeped in wine, and that quiet piece of courage shaped like a prayer. There is no mercy of ether here. You hand your patient a wooden dowel to bite and a generous swallow of ale for borrowed valor. This may tingle, you suggest, an optimistic lie shared between professionals. Steel meets skin, shouts meet rafters, and somewhere in the chaos an apprentice contemplates a gentler trade. You cut, drain, and grope for divine guidance, removing slivers of flesh that glisten like secrets under moonlight. Germs remain an unnamed rumor. Infection, you believe, rides on foul air and questionable deeds. Your blade last served a goat, but faith is a fine disinfectant. When the deed is done, you baptize the wound with wine, watching crimson eddies swirl across trembling flesh. A hot iron hisses, sealing edges in a puff of steam, or perhaps you weave spider silk soaked in oil over the gap. Both methods half science, half theater, wholly convincing. Fresh linen binds the injury. Whispered instructions bind the soul. Rest, but not too long. Idleness breeds cold humors. Should he heal, you claim success. Should he perish, you note that even Galen mislaid a gladiator or two, and history still crowned him brilliant. Yet your sharpest instrument is neither knife nor saw. It is the humble leech. A portable legion of living lancet sloshes inside a glass jar you affectionately call the squirming chalice. Fever, headache, an unseen chill sent by spirits? A bouquet of leeches covers all. You select one, plump, energetic, hungry as a Gothic knight, and settle it on a warm patch of skin. If it clings at once, you smile, confirmation from nature herself. If it hesitates, you blame Mercury's contrary spin and try again. As the creature fattens, your patient pales. An equal exchange, you explain, toxins for pallor. Your bile misbehaved. You murmur while the leech drinks in silence. Once sated, the worm detaches, engorged and gleaming. A sprinkle of salt encourages release. A dash of vinegar convinces the stubborn. The patient, dizzy yet oddly hopeful, asks if balance has returned. You reply, "We have taken a noble first step. True harmony follows courage." Bandage secure, you close your jar and straighten your robe's heavy folds. The corridor seems calmer now, tapestries rustling with hidden applause. Stars still spin beyond the arrow-slit windows, but tonight you have stitched earth and heaven a little closer. Let your own eyes flutter shut. Hear the faint drip of melted wax. Feel the hush settling over stone floors polished by centuries of hurried footsteps. Somewhere in the vault of history, you kneel beside a wounded stranger, blade steady, heart steady, trading pain for the promise of dawn. And as you drift toward sleep, trust that in this grand tapestry of time, even imperfect healers carry a quiet magic, turning fear into faith, one leech, one star, one whispered hope at a time. You watch the leech slump off the patient's arm, pulse glutted, body gleaming like an obsidian teardrop, and you feel an almost parental pride. The creature seems satisfied, and in this age of whispers and candlelight, a contented leech is proof enough that unseen forces are humming in your favor. Faith, after all, is a delicate perfume. A single drop keeps the room believing in miracles you never quite explain. Your grasp of the mind, however, is more horoscope than handbook. With no lectures on neurons or chatter about trauma, you navigate behavior the way sailors read storms, by omen and instinct. When a wife goes mute for a fortnight, staring holes into plaster and serenading shadows with a tuneless hum, you tally the possibilities. Surplus black bile, a rascally imp, or both. A quick consultation with the parish priest, a sprinkle of holy water that smells of damp stone, and a candle whose smoke curls like questioning spirits. These set the stage. You announce to her trembling relatives that melancholy has colonized her heart, perhaps abetted by a minor demon named, why not, Gregorius? They shudder. You bow. Coins change hands. Melancholy is your favorite net. It hauls in sorrow, nervousness, quiet poets, and any woman who turns too many pages after sunset. Prescriptions arrive in escalating severity. Lavender compresses for the docile, bleeding for the restless, forced midnight prayers for the obstinate. Should desperation deepen, you propose an exorcism, theatrical, lucrative, and blessedly imprecise. Those deemed utterly lost meet the monastery's locked barn, where cold baths, lash-streaked sermons, and straw mattresses await. Fright fixes fractures of the mind. You declare while visitors nod, terrified they might be next. For the stubbornly distraught, some colleagues drill neat holes in skulls to let the wind wander out. You have yet to brave the practice, but applaud the courage of anyone who does. It's good for reputation if not for survival rates. Women, of course, earn special diagnoses. Should one cry too freely or laugh too loud, you blame hysteria. A roaming womb darting through her ribs like a bored house cat. She must breathe lavender, sip valerian, and, if fortune smiles, marry quickly or pilgrim farther, preferably both. Improvement signals grace. Decline proves destiny. Either outcome lets you sleep soundly. Into this delicate theater stroll the apothecaries, those cheerful alchemists who clatter mortars and pestles while dripping honeyed tonics that sometimes, infuriatingly, work. Their shops smell of time and promise. Their prices sting less than yours, and their shelves glitter with real solutions. Yet they lack robes, lack Latin, lack the star maps etched by Aristotle's ghost. You wield planets and prestige. They wield roots and results. Patients drawn to their doors bruise your pride. You respond with loftier rhetoric, grumbling that folk remedies reek of pagan caution while you, a scholar by candle and comet, speak the very grammar of the cosmos. Still, on uneasy evenings, you grudgingly pair your cooling lunar tonic prescription with their jars of ground willow bark. And if the fever breaks you bask in triumph while hinting that they underboiled the mandrake anyway. The rivalry never truly crowns a victor. Villagers pay double for double opinions. Gossip fattens on each mixed success. And the parish priest ultimately claims every recovery as proof of providence. Yet dignity, your most prized salve, remains intact. You continue striding through streets, hat tall as tower spires, quoting Saturn's temperament and warning of rebellious spleens. People listen wide-eyed, not because your science sings, but because your certainty is louder than their doubt. And herbs? Ah yes, the green chorus that lines your satchel. You memorize their silhouettes at dusk. Yarrow like feathered blades, foxglove nodding with secret strength. Though truthfully you know only which tinctures hush pain enough to let prayers do the rest. Still, under moonlight you appear every inch the earthly wizard, blending nettles with mystique, sprinkling chamomile in wine, citing Dioscorides while hoping no one asks for page numbers. So breathe easy now, traveler beneath your blankets. Let the low hum of your room become monastery chants echoing across stone. Picture the silent woman finding her voice in lavender dusk, the stitched-up warrior daring dawn, the apothecary's herbs mingling with your star-drenched counsel, and leeches singing their quiet gospel of balance. In the flicker between heartbeats and history, you are the keeper of fragile hopes, moving through shadows with blades unsterile, words untested, yet conviction bright enough to guide the fearful into sleep. And as your eyelids grow heavy, remember, the past is a lantern swaying down endless corridors. Even when its light wavers, it teaches us to marvel at every imperfect healer who dared to name the darkness, and in naming, gently kept it at bay. You dig through the crackling leather pouch that passes for your apothecary, fingertips brushing brittle leaves and shadow-dried stems, and announce with supreme certainty that valerian root will tame the patient's inner whirlpool. Why valerian? Because its scent can drown a goat at 10 paces, and its fumes lull even the most stubborn soul toward drowsy surrender. Two dependable signs that something important is happening. Wormwood waits beside it, your sharp-tongued multitasker for belly storms, flea rebellions, and neighbors who speak too loudly at dawn. Nettle pricks for pain, mallow soothes fire beneath the skin, and mandrake, curiously man-shaped, mildly deadly, ruinously pricey, makes illiterate onlookers gasp at your daring. Truth be told, every dose you grind is equal parts folklore, rumor, and dramatic pause. You trust the whispers of traveling monks, the tale of a shepherd's cousin's goat miraculously cured, and the way certain herbs simply look mystical beneath moonlight. Latin incantations roll off your tongue as you mash, boil, and drizzle honey, part medicine, part disguise for the taste of damp earth. Should the brew hush a fever, you'll nod gravely and commend the herb's cool temperament. Should it fail, you'll suggest the patient forgot to believe hard enough and perhaps angered Saturn before sunrise. When desperation crowds prudence, you mix a handful of plants together and pray they argue among themselves instead of against your reputation. Call it horticultural dice with vomiting as the house edge. You prefer gathering ingredients yourself, wandering hedgerows at dawn, cloak damp with dew. Wild growth, you insist, pulses with untamed vigor, and the added dirt amplifies the rustic thrill. In your secret ledger of success, herbal practice rests on a three-legged stool. 30% tradition, 20% intuition, 50% performance. Still, a cup of bitter tea elicits fewer screams than a blade, so the townsfolk sip and hope. Yet every mortar pound reverberates beneath cathedral arches. The church hovers like a watchful parent, ready to praise or condemn. A hacking cough might be simple phlegm, or heaven's rebuke for unspoken sins. Before you unveil your marigold poultice, a confession may be required. Before you lance a boil, holy water must sparkle on the patient's brow. You've already been cautioned. Curing a baron's gout with vinegar stones was borderline sorcery, and murmuring that stars tug at digestion skated perilously close to heresy. Dissection, best not finish that sentence aloud. So you weave amen into every incision, keep a modest crucifix nestled among your blades, and leave ample space for priests to parade relics across the sickbed. Collaboration becomes choreography. Your earthly tincture, their celestial benediction. Recovery warrants a miracle. Relapse proves the Almighty has subtler plans, or that you need more incense. Either verdict spares your skin. Sometimes, though, even heaven-steeped tonics can't silence a limb that blackens and reeks like rain-soaked bread forgotten for weeks. Amputation looms. You skip breakfast, hunger sharpens focus, and heft the saw. A sturdy table, a loyal friend to pin shoulders, a mouth-bit bar of oak. That is your theater. You murmur, "May grace steady my hand." Then carve through flesh that parts like overripe fruit. The scent, iron and charred despair, rises as you cauterize stump to stave off unseen miasmas. You bind what remains in linen, speak calm assurances about balance restored, and step back while your own pulse thrums louder than church bells. Should the patient survive, villagers recount your prowess by firelight. Should they slip into the next world, mourners cite divine mystery, and you remind yourself you acted before rot spread soulward. In either ending, you keep moving, bag clinking, cloak swirling, because the line between healer and hazard is as thin as spider silk, and confidence keeps you from falling. So settle now beneath your blanket's gentle weight. Hear the phantom rustle of nettle leaves, the distant echo of chapel organs, the rhythmic rasp of a bone saw fading into night's hush. History wraps you in its lantern-lit corridors where imperfect hands brood comfort from roots and faith alike. Trust the flicker of those forgotten embers. Let them guide you toward rest, where even the rough-edged remedies of yesterday soften into dream-stitched wonder. You brace the patient's thigh with one hand and hoist the saw with the other, an assistant at your elbow balancing the sacred quartet of supplies. A tourniquet, a rag for clenching, a jug of ale for your courage, and a bucket destined for whatever used to be attached. You soften the news with heroic adjectives. Necessary, valorous, perhaps even life-saving. Knowing full well the only thing your words heal is panic's edge. A deep breath, a whisper about rebalancing the humors, and steel meets flesh. At first the blade glides. Then, as the screaming finds its stride, you hurry past muscle to bone, working like a frantic carpenter who forgot his blueprints. The severed limb thuds into the bucket, a ghastly bouquet, and a heated iron hisses across the stump, filling the room with a scent no candle can excuse. Linen bindings follow, soaked in whatever hope you have left that rot will stay away until sunrise. Final instructions are simple. Keep warm, avoid bad air, and try very hard not to die. Should recovery come, townsfolk label you Miracle Smith. Should death arrive, you declare the corruption had already reached the soul. Reputation preserved either way. Night barely settles when a guttering cough slithers through the street. Wet, ragged, unmistakable. Plague has returned. Memory conjures swollen groins, walnut-sized blotches, the onion-sweet stench of despair. Instinct sends your hand to the beaked mask, stuffed with dried rose petals, vinegar rags, and blind optimism. You may not grasp contagion, but you do grasp survival. Distance is the first remedy. Tools clatter back into the satchel. Apprentice gathers the leeches, and you mutter something about lunar misalignment while edging toward the gate. No poultice, no leech, no fervent chant tames the specter. Some swear by torching herbs. Others torch entire districts. Occasionally, the fire even helps. Rather than be remembered as the fool who promised garlic water against humanity's dusk, you slip into countryside shadows, perhaps to audit a monastery's wine cellar until the miasma forgets your name. A doctor's wisdom, after all, includes knowing when to vanish. Yet even exile cannot dull the human appetite for spectacle. Picture a soaring cathedral, pillars climbing like stone forests, stained glass flinging constellations of color across solemn pews, and smack in the middle, a mock bishop wobbling in reversed vestments, blessing the flock with a moonlit derriere. Welcome to the Feast of Fools, that annual winter carnival where order tilts on its head. Choir boys parade as cannons, lowly deacons crown a lord of misrule. Mock masses bray with flatulence and barnyard interludes, and sacred ritual dissolves into raucous parody. Imagine the janitor promoted to abbot for 24 riotous hours. Every decree rendered backward, blindfolded, and blissfully inebriated. The church, curiously, allows this upheaval, believing a measured burst of chaos keeps deeper revolt at bay. For one sanctioned day, incense mingles with ale, Gregorian tones warp into bawdy ballads, and the very walls of authority exhale a laugh. Then sunrise calls the world to heal, vestments turn right side out, and monks mop up wine while whispering prayers for swift forgiveness. So as you pull your cloak tighter against the countryside mist, let the echo of distant laughter and the rattle of plague carts blend into a lullaby. History's lantern swings overhead, sometimes revealing grim surgery, sometimes spotlighting divine absurdity. Trust its flicker to guide you into sleep, where even a weary physician may trade sawdust memories for dreams of vaulted ceilings, fool bishops, and a tomorrow mercifully free of coughs that smell like sorrow. You slip through a narrow side door of the cathedral just as dusk settles, expecting incense and whispered prayers. But the moment your boots meet the stone, you feel the walls pulsing with rebellion. Tonight, The pillars that usually loom like silent judges bend to a different rhythm. One spun by masked revelers who whirl beneath stained glass saints in a riot of color and clamor. For a single winter's day, always near the turning of the year, the feast of fools cracks open the iron shell of medieval order, and you find yourself inside the beating heart of holy mischief. By daylight, every soul in this town marches to a hierarchy so rigid it could chisel granite. Peasants kneel to lords, clerics bow to bishops, bishops bow to Rome, and everyone bows to heaven. But deep down, even the most obedient spine needs to stretch. The cathedral chapter understands this truth better than anyone, which is why they secretly stage the very chaos that seems poised to undo them. Think of it as a release valve on a pressure kettle. If it isn't open now, the whole contraption could explode. So the clergy themselves draft the invitation. Choir boys trade cassocks for carnival masks. Deacons stitch paper crowns for drunks. And sacred vestments are flipped inside out in comic inversion. A lord of misrule is elected from the lowest rung. Sometimes a gangly chorister, sometimes the town's loudest alehouse poet. He's hoisted onto a throne of ale barrels, clad in patched-together bishop's robes, and handed a scepter made of ladles. With cabbage leaves fluttering from his mitre, he blesses his flock by flinging turnips into the crowd. Every cheer that greets him is an arrow aimed at the real hierarchies he parodies. Out in the streets, masks bob among flares of torchlight. Lutes strum bawdy ballads, and tannin-rough voices belt verses that twist solemn hymns into wicked punch lines. Some revelers ride donkeys straight through church doors, swapping holy water for mulled wine and swapping Latin verses for irreverent limericks. You catch the scent of ale mingling with beeswax and tallow, a heady perfume of devotion and defiance. Inside, the cathedral nave becomes a stage. Cannon after cannon parades in drag or donkey hides. A monk in half-fastened robes juggles communion wafers down the center aisle. Then a procession escorts a docile donkey toward the altar for the infamous Ass Massachusetts. At scripted moments in the service, the animal brays, loud, echoing, absurd, and the congregation replies in perfect unison, hee-haw, hee-haw. The sound ricochets off vaulted stone, shaking loose centuries of solemnity. Yet beneath the laughter runs razor-sharp satire. When a choir boy can don a bishop's mitre and read the gospel backward, every bystander must wonder how mystical those robes really are. When holy incense is swapped for thick smoke from burning shoes, the faithful taste the pungent reminder that fragrance alone cannot sanctify power. Even the choice of the Lord of Misrule, a nobody exalted for 24 hours, mocks the notion of divine right. If a lanky youth can command applause in patched silk, perhaps true authority is flimsier than anyone admits. Not all clerics appreciate the joke. Some grit their teeth, praying the mockery burns itself out before sunrise. Others join in, believing that sanctioned disorder keeps deeper descent asleep. But you sense the tension humming in every prank. Blasphemy balanced on a tightrope, gleeful taunts aimed at gilded ceilings. Somehow no line feels too sharp to cross tonight, because the Feast of Fools is built on collective agreement that tomorrow the world will revert to form. Peasants will bow again, bishops will preach again, and God will regain his thunderous silence. For now, though, the cathedral is alive with outrageous grace notes. Jugglers toss chalices like cheap tin cups. Clowns hand out mock indulgences redeemable for excessive laughter. Disorderly deacons stage sham excommunications of local nobles, sentencing them to dance barefoot in the snow. Every gasp, every howl of laughter is both release and reminder. Systems are human-made, and humans can upend them, if only for a heartbeat. You watch until torch flames gutter low and revelers slump against pillars, their laughter melting into hoarse chants that echo in the rafters. Soon priests will sweep away cabbage leaves and stomp out spilled wine. Dawn will rinse the air with winter light. Parchment registers will resume listing dues and penances. Yet memories of this holy anarchy will linger, a secret ember glowing beneath daily obedience. As you step back into the chill night, let those embers warm your thoughts. Feel the hush after chaos settle over you like a soft cloak. The same walls that rang with donkey brays will host quiet vespers tomorrow, but you carry the echo of that rebellion into your dreams. It whispers that even the most immovable stone can dance for a moment, and sometimes that moment is enough to keep hearts from turning to dust. Close your eyes now. Let the distant phantom bray fade into the rhythm of your breath. Somewhere in history's deep corridors, a cabbage-crowned fool still hurls blessings at a cheering crowd, proving that laughter can be as sacred as silence. Drift toward sleep, knowing that behind every grand order lies a hidden day of inversion, and understanding that secret may be the truest kind of wisdom. You slip into the candlelit nave just as the last bell fades, expecting the hush of vespers. Yet tonight the air vibrates with something far wilder. These stone walls, usually stern as tablets of law, have traded gravity for giddy revolt. Papal bulls have thundered, bishops have scribbled furious decrees, and yet here you stand in the swirling eye of a sanctioned storm. The Feast of Fools refuses to die because every soul in town secretly needs one day to shout instead of kneel. You feel the thrill of liberation ripple through the crowd. For 51 sober weeks, the cathedral serves as the spine of the city, heaven's courtroom, landlord of salvation. But on this single, blessedly unholy night, that spine bends so the people can breathe. Peasants who normally bow to lords, clerics who habitually bow to bishops, even bishops who bow to Rome, all unite in riotous irreverence, swigging ale where holy water ought to stand and swapping solemn hymns for jokes that echo off stained glass like mischievous arrows. Humor here is no child's play. It is a scalpel. Choir boys, subdeacons, and lowly scribes know the Mass by heart, so they twist it with frightening precision. Sermons tumble out in babbling pseudo-Latin while the priest preaches with his underclothes for a mitre. Incense is replaced with pungent manure smoke. Psalms morph into raucous drinking songs praising gluttony, lust, and the sacred power of wine. A mock-Lent blessing of sausages, delivered with immaculate ceremony, lands its jab at ecclesiastical hypocrisy harder than any pamphlet ever could. When a faux bishop secretly relieves himself into a bucket mid-benediction, the congregation explodes in laughter that tastes of rebellion. Yes, it is coarse, but every guffaw comes laced with critique. If holiness can be so easily mimicked, perhaps the hierarchy is more costume than covenant. At the festival's center reigns the Lord of Misrule, a jester king chosen from the cathedral's lowest rung or the town's most notorious reveler. Imagine a wide-eyed chorister barely sprouting whiskers, hoisted on a throne of ale barrels, draped in pigskin robes, flinging cabbage to bless his flock. His court, tipsy monks, howling jugglers, and mischievous canons, hands out bogus indulgences, stages mock excommunications, and sentences arrogant merchants to dance barefoot in the snow. By crowning an absurd nobody, the town prods a sacred question. If this lad can wear the regalia for a day, how invincible is divine right? Really? Not everyone laughs. High clergy pen scathing letters, brandishing words like heresy and sacrilege. Statutes are drafted, fines threatened, and yet the feast keeps rising from the ashes of outrage. Why? Because even priests crave release. Many entered holy orders as teenagers, surrendered comfort, and now trudge through dawn prayers, ink-stained manuscripts, and the suffocating weight of eternal vigilance. For them, this carnival isn't sin, it's oxygen. Better to howl like donkeys once a year than let resentment ferment in silence. That secret is why some bishops wink at the chaos. They draft unofficial boundaries. Push the parody too far and you'll serve kitchen duty for a fortnight, but dance deftly on the edge and you'll earn a mug of ale. Even the sternest abbot may chuckle when a choir boy delivers a mock exorcism on a wheel of cheese, because the theater reminds every watcher that faith must bend a little or break completely. Deep inside, you sense the dual pulse of devotion and dissent. The same hands that dramatize a gospel backward will turn sober pages of scripture at dawn. When revelers parade chicken bones and pig teeth as holy relics, they mock abuses, yes, but they also prove they still understand and care about the rituals they lampoon. Laughter becomes the crowd's rough-hewn sermon. We see your contradictions, and we refuse to swallow them quietly. Nevertheless, tension simmers. Each blasphemous bray hovers inches from a clerical boot stamping it out. Over centuries, patience dwindles. Councils tighten rules, city statutes trim the feast's wild edges. Yet even as official tolerance wanes, the memory of holy anarchy lingers like an ember in winter straw, a reminder that power, when weighed down by unyielding gravity, will always provoke one glorious leap into inversion. Now, as torches sputter low and revelers slump against pillars, you step outside into crisp night air scented with ale, beeswax, and freedom. Tomorrow, bells will summon penance, hierarchies will snap back into place, and the donkey's bray will fade into whispered recollection. Yet you carry the echo home, proof that even the mightiest walls can laugh, if only for a heartbeat. Let that heartbeat steady your own as you drift towards sleep, confident that somewhere beneath the cloak of history, a fool still hurls turnips at authority, and in doing so, keeps the world just bendable enough to hope. You stand at the edge of twilight, watching fire-red clouds gild the cathedral spire, and sense a different storm brewing, one not of laughter but of censure. Reforming preachers thunder that devils dance among the masked choristers, warning that every chuckle rolling through vaulted naves will one day return as a wail of damnation. Their words strike sparks, yet an unspoken truth still flickers inside cloisters. Sometimes the hearts sworn to carry crosses by day must don jester caps by night simply to stay whole. Step beyond the church doors and the feast spills into crooked lanes like wine from a toppled chalice. Bakers abandon ovens, blacksmiths lay down hammers, and housewives bloom into queens draped in curtain-cloth capes. Ill-sweet songs ricochet off timber walls. Market stalls become impromptu stages where mock trials indict crimes such as excessive sternness or failure to dance. The sentences, a custard pie to the face or a dignity-shredding parade, bed sheet toga, chicken on the head, laughter as confetti. Beneath every gag, a deeper pulse beats. The crushed, taxed, plague-scarred commoner finally talks back. Satire tears off its mask only to reveal sharper teeth. A burlap puppet of the Pope slumps on a cart, jostled through mud by giggling children. A boy bishop marches past, swinging a toy crozier with all the gravitas of Rome. If a child can lead a procession, what alchemy makes a real bishop sacred? Local sheriffs fume, but enforcing solemnity during the feast is like sweeping a river with a broom. Every stroke proves the current stronger. Soon the clang of resistance rings far beyond parish walls. In papal chambers, aghast officials envision altars defiled by wine stains and moonlit clerks, gospel charades performed to bawdy rhyme. Bulls thunder in 1445. The venerable Cathedral of Sens must silence this mockery. Other dioceses follow with threats of fines, defrocking, even excommunication. Yet the festival refuses to bow. Masks migrate to back-alley taverns. Processions melt into winter carnivals. Misrule finds sanctuary behind 100 different feast names. The spirit lives on, softer in daylight but flaming after dusk. Rome understands the peril. Laughter pries loose the mortar of reverence. Once you snicker at a brocade mitre, fear never returns quite as tall. Still, many clerics crave the uproar they condemn. Life within stone walls is relentless liturgy, copied parchment, and vows tightening like frost. One jubilant day of turning the world upside down relieves a crushing weight. Bishops who publicly scowl sometimes privately smile. Better to bleed excess energy in licensed satire than risk a pressure burst of true rebellion. Unwritten rules evolve. Mock, but not too blasphemously. Jab, but leave the core unbroken. And seasoned jesters read that line like acrobats on a razor. Yet reformist winds grow colder. By the 1500s, councils clamp down. By the 1600s, the Feast of Fools retreats from calendars altogether. Official silence settles where donkey brays once echoed. But memory is a sly archivist. Misrule seeps into carnival masks, Mardi Gras cruise, and every topsy-turvy holiday that still coaxes sovereigns onto stilts and begs saints to grin. The feast's body may be buried, yet its ghost lingers in every rebellious laugh that refuses to be tamed. So breathe in the hush after revelry. Feel how the night vibrates with stories left unsung. Somewhere, beneath layers of obedience, a fool still readies his cabbage crown, waiting for the moment hierarchy blinks. And perhaps, as you drift toward sleep, you sense why the church feared him. Not because he was wicked, but because his laughter could make the mighty tremble and teach the weary to hope. You unfold the elegant parchment, its crimson ribbon slipping like a whisper between your fingers, and your pulse quickens. Tonight you, a middling court observer with more curiosity than influence, are summoned to dine with His Holiness Pope Alexander VI, patriarch of the Borgia clan whose name drips through Rome like honey mixed with venom. Already you picture candlelight flickering over gilded ceilings, the scent of spiced wine twining with incense, and rumors slithering beneath every marble arch. Before you set foot in the Vatican's private apartments, you feel the old spirit of misrule tugging at your sleeve. The Feast of Fools is officially buried, its donkey masks and cabbage crowns locked away by generations of reformers. But the fool's grin never vanished. It simply found new disguises. Where once a choir boy flung turnips from a makeshift throne, now playwrights brandish satire, carnival riders toss bead-bright mockery, and jesters in velvet tell inconvenient truths to princes who dare not silence them. Even popes follow that current, whether they admit it or not. They rule atop a stage where costume, pageantry, and strategic laughter can shift empires. The guard at the bronze gate eyes you, then admits you into corridors painted with saints whose calm faces cannot smother the murmur of intrigue. Through tapestries you glimpse cardinals in crimson robes whispering alliances, servants scurrying with dishes heaped in truffle-flecked splendor, and somewhere distant, soft as an afterthought, the echo of distant street singers lampooning those very cardinals in ribald verse. The energy of inversion survives outside these walls, shaping public opinion as deftly as any encyclical. You recall how, centuries earlier, cathedral chapters birthed the Feast of Fools to relieve society's strangling collar. Masks, chaos, and laughter became a release valve in a universe obsessed with sin and status. Reformers later condemned it, fearing that parody lodged too close to heresy. Papal bulls thundered, bans multiplied. Yet the fools slipped their noose, reappearing as Shakespeare's truth-telling jesters, as Rabelais' earthy giants, as Mardi Gras monarchs tossing coins to revelers. Even the church appropriated the strategy. Jesuit playwrights spun humorous reversals to deliver moral lessons, proving that irony, once feared, could also fortify faith. If laughter can survive centuries of censure, you wonder what undercurrents steer tonight's gathering. Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, wields charm and cunning in equal measure, surrounding himself with courtiers, diplomats, and rumored poisoners. Some hail him as a master diplomat who reconciles warring houses. Others whisper of bribery, nepotism, and midnight liaisons. One thing is certain. In this room, the boundary between reverence and theater is hair-thin. A steward leads you into the Sala dei Papi. Chandeliers blaze above a long table where silver goblets sparkle like captive stars. The Pope arrives last, robes of immaculate white offset by a sapphire ring heavy enough to anchor a small ship. His smile seems almost conspiratorial, an invitation to enter a play whose script you have not read. Around him gather his children by blood and politics. Cesare, broad-shouldered, rumored blades still warm from campaigns. Lucrezia, luminous, her almond eyes revealing nothing, and Juan, golden-haired, as quick to jest as to duel. Courtiers bend low, but glances dart sharper than daggers. The meal unfolds in courses. Roasted partridge scented with oranges, eels glazed in sweet wine, gilded marchpanes shaped like pomegranates bursting with crimson seeds. Conversation ripples from theology to territorial wagers, from Florentine banking schemes to the merits of the new Italian comedy troupes. Troupes whose masked zany echo the medieval fool, poking fun at greedy merchants and lovesick scholars alike. Alexander laughs heartily at a joke comparing rival cardinals to carnival puppets. You catch Cesari's smirk. He knows satire can soften an enemy before steel finishes the lesson. Between servings, musicians pluck lutes, their melodies twirling through columns where shadows dance like silent jesters. Lucrezia, fingers resting on a goblet's rim, recounts a Norse tale in which a king only discovers wisdom after trading crowns with his court clown for a single night. Her voice lingers on the word trading, a reminder that power, like a mask, can move from face to face in a blink. You feel the room pivot. Talk drifts toward rumors of French troops massing beyond the Alps, of alliances sealed by marriages, of letters soaked in invisible ink. Alexander touches his ring to hush the clamor. Then, eyes glinting, tells a parable. A kingdom so frightened of rebellion that it outlawed laughter, only to learn that silence breeds darker plots. He lifts his goblet. Better, he says softly, to hear a jest in the throne room than a sword scraping the gates. Laughter rises, cautious at first, then warm. In that moment, the ghost of the Feast of Fools nods approval. Authority, it seems, still courts humor, sometimes to deflect, sometimes to dominate, always aware that a well-timed jest can sway hearts where decrees cannot. This dinner, like the long-ago carnival mass, blends solemn ritual with calculated spectacle. You sip spiced wine and imagine how tomorrow's gossip sheets will paint the scene. Perhaps Lucrezia's smile will sprout horns. Perhaps Cesari's toast will sprout wings of prophecy. Satire remains the people's mirror, reflecting grandeur into absurdity, and vice versa. Hours later, you exit into night scented with cypress and distant bonfires. Behind you, Vatican lanterns flicker gold against marble, a fortress of doctrine. Ahead, street vendors pack away wares while children chase each other with carnival masks half-painted, half-finished, yet already alive with possibility. You hear a sly melody, a minstrel crooning about a pope who dines on fortunes and a jester who dines on truth. The crowd chuckles, coins jingle into a cap, and somewhere a reformer scowls at the blasphemy. But the song lives on. As you find your lodging and ease into the hush of candlelight, let sleep fold around you like a velvet curtain after the final act. Remember the fool's lesson whispered across centuries. When power grows heavy, laughter slips underneath to tilt the stage. Masks may change. Plague Dr. Beaks, carnival visors, or digital avatars. But the impulse endures. Close your eyes, feel the gentle sway of inversion, and rest easy knowing that even in the most gilded halls, the echo of the jester's bell keeps kings, bishops, and popes honest, if only for a heartbeat. You glide a fingertip over damask cuffs one last time, steadying your breath before palace doors swing wide. Tonight's banquet in the Apostolic Palace is less a supper than a chessboard, each goblet, candlestick, and silk-draped chair a piece positioned by House Borgia's unseen hand. Step wrong and you become the pawn that never leaves its square. A ripple of music ushers you into vaulting halls where tapestries shimmer under chandeliers of Venetian glass. Rose petals soften marble floors, releasing a faint perfume that mingles with incense and slow-roasted boar. Gilded chargers, relics pried from conquered courts, glint beside knives etched with the papal bull. Somewhere, a choir hidden behind crimson curtains breathes a chord that seems to vibrate in your bones. You are not the only one who feels the tremor. Diplomats smooth jeweled sleeves, merchants count favors owed, and poets, some genuine, some hired blades disguised in meter, trade smiles sharp as stilettos. At the high table, Pope Alexander VI raises a jeweled hand, and conversation stills. To refuse this summons would have spelled treason. To accept it may prove equally fatal. The first course arrives. Pheasant beneath its own golden skin, stuffed with figs soaked in honey and Persian cinnamon. No guest dares lift a fork until Cesare Borgia tastes his share, an act half courtesy, half warning. Rumors insist he carries a draft of cantarella within those embroidered sleeves, a poison said to borrow the flavor of almonds while stealing the breath by increments. Truth or slander, the genius lies in the doubt. Your tongue tingles with phantom bitterness as you swallow. Wine flows from crystal fountains chilled by snow hauled down from the Apennines. Servants, trained to pour and to forget, refill cups before thirst can form. Toasts bloom, to Rome, to peace, to His Holiness. Yet every raised goblet doubles as a mirror, reflecting who drinks deeply and who hesitates. Laughter rings, but eyes keep score. Between courses, minstrels strike up madrigals laced with suggestion. Dancers weave through torchlight in gauze that veils nothing, and jugglers hurl flaming blades whose arcs sketch silent threats over cardinal hats. Each spectacle whispers a single message. We command wealth, pleasure, and, should we wish, your last heartbeat. Enjoy. Then, like dawn slipping through shutters, she appears. Lucrezia Borgia, sun-bright hair threaded with pearls, smile soft as velvet yet edged with opal-sharp wit. She drifts from table to table, pairing innocent compliments with questions that mine secrets while seeming mere flirtation. A general blushes, a banker stutters, both conquered without a sword drawn. When she pauses beside you, her eyes hold yours a breath longer than propriety allows. In that moment you understand why gossip paints her as angel, siren, and spy at once. She moves on, leaving the faint scent of bergamot, and the awareness that your heartbeat has betrayed you. More dishes arrive. Boar stuffed with pheasant, oysters still twitching, candied citrus carved into lilies. Extravagance is not indulgence. It is architecture. A stomach drugged with abundance forgets revolt. Yet as plates empty, tension coils anew. You notice how some guests touch only fruit, how others swap goblets under the guise of clumsy laughter. Trust is scarce currency here. A troubadour sings of a jester who once crowned a donkey king for a single night, a sly echo of the Feast of Fools long banned from these walls. The song reminds every listener that power can flip like a coin, and even popes sit on thrones that wobble beneath enough laughter. Alexander smiles, as though the warning amuses him. Dessert arrives beneath domes of spun sugar. As spoons tap crystal, Cesare rises for a final toast. His words drip honey, praise for friendship, vows of peace. Yet when he lifts his chalice, silence thickens. You taste almond in the air, though none on the plate. Around you, some glasses halt midway, others empty in brave gulps. A single second stretches into eternity. Then Cesare drinks first. Laughter erupts, brittle at the edges. But the game is over. The lesson lingers. Hours later you step into Rome's moon-washed streets, head buzzing with wine and unspoken riddles. Behind you, Borgia servants douse candles and sweep petals into ash baskets. Ahead, distant taverns bustle with cheaper revels. Masked revelers, street mimes poking fun at powerful silhouettes in palace windows. The fool's spirit lives here still, mocking, needling, refusing to kneel. You breathe night air tinged with jasmine and city dust, and a final thought settles. The banquet was never about poison. It was about uncertainty. The Borgias mastered the art of making every heartbeat a wager. In that tension lies their dominion, and your uneasy fascination. Let that thought drift with you into sleep. Imagine chandeliers dimming, choirs exhaling one last chord, Lucrezia's perfume fading like dawn mist. Remember that in every age, the stage changes but the play endures. Masks, power, fear, and the quiet zing of rebellion. If tomorrow you wake unsure whether last night's almond was real or imagined, then the Borgias have already won, and the fool, somewhere in the shadows, is smiling. You notice her long before the musicians change key. Lucrezia Borgia glides between dukes and diplomats like a swan threading lilies, gold-stitched velvet flickering in candlelight, neckline daring enough to steal breath yet dignified enough to silence gossip, at least until she passes. Compliments fall from her lips soft as rose petals, yet their edges gleam. A single phrase can make a wary envoy lower his guard or a boastful marquis forget every lesson in caution. Some whisper she is bewitched, others that she is bait dangled by father and brother, but watch closely and you see something rarer than sorcery. Complete control. One expertly timed toast, and half the hall tips goblets without a second thought. Rumor trails her like expensive perfume. A careless flirt who pressed too near, an inquisitive merchant who asked the wrong question. Both reportedly bedridden before week's end. Rome swears she carries a hollow ring, its pivot loaded with powdered death. Truth? Fiction? The mystery itself is her finest weapon. You recall talk of a banquet where she recited Petrarch's verses directly to an ambassador. Days later he died, and diplomacy unraveled. Illness claimed the Vatican. Murder murmured the piazzas. No matter, absences only amplify her legend, and invitations keep arriving because to be excluded from Lucrezia's table is to fall from the very map of power. While silk and smiles capture every gaze, Cesare Borgia drifts along the room's darker rim. Black velvet, molten gold trim, sword hilt polished like a moonlit river. Words are unnecessary. A glance from him feels like an audition for survival. These gatherings are his private observatories. Over roasted crane and candied citrus he measures rivalries, sows double meanings, marks who flushes at a jest, who reaches for the goblet too quickly, who pretends not to fear the taste of almonds. He rarely moves a piece tonight, yet you sense entire provinces slide across political chessboards in his mind. Stories cling to him, too. A rebellious guest leaving the party only to wash ashore in the Tiber by dawn. A reluctant heiress married off to a cousin renowned for hunting accidents. Coincidence acquires a blade in Cesari's orbit. At one legendary feast he seated duel-prone envoys elbow to elbow, nudged their tempers with a single offhand jest, and, while goblets toppled, signed a clandestine treaty across the hall. By dessert, one envoy was disgraced, another exiled, and Cesare walked away with a fortress. Yet the rumor that chills every spine is whispered rather than spoken. Cantarella, an elegant toxin, scentless until the faintest almond aftertaste betrays it. Too late. Victims depart a banquet smiling, only to curl days later beneath invisible fire. Chronicles cannot prove its existence. Enemies cannot dismiss it. That uncertainty is the Borgia genius. You stare into your wine and taste dread, whether or not poison glimmers within. You watch as Lucrezia lifts her chalice once more. Her eyes skim the assembly, pausing when they meet Cesari's. He inclines his head, a gesture unreadable, perhaps permission, perhaps warning. She offers a toast to friendship unclouded, and crystal shivers in unison. Around you some drink deeply out of bravado. Others sip like gamblers counting cards. You follow suit, pulse hammering, tasting fig and clove, but also possibility, fear's peculiar flavor. A quartet of lutes swells behind velvet drapes. Dancers in gauze weave patterns of light and shadow. Acrobats send sparks fluttering toward frescoed ceilings where pagan gods lounge unashamed. Everything you see dazzles, yet every spark reminds you who controls the tinderbox. Refuse their hospitality and you invite sudden ruin. Embrace it too eagerly and you risk becoming tomorrow's cautionary anecdote. Somewhere near midnight Cesare finally speaks, voice smooth as warm glass. He thanks the gathering for its steadfast loyalty, eyes lingering on a Visconti envoy known for flexible allegiances. The envoy laughs too loudly, drains his cup, then sets it down with a hand that trembles just once. Cesare notices. You notice that Cesare notices. And you understand how reputations are sealed without blood staining a single napkin. When the last plate, pomegranate seeds set in sheets of amber sugar, has been admired and abandoned, guests drift toward exit corridors lined with statues that see everything yet say nothing. Lucrezia wishes each traveler safe rest. Cesare nods in a way that feels like sealing an invisible envelope. Outside, Rome's night smells of jasmine, river damp, and secrets warming on terracotta rooftops. You exhale, realizing you never stopped measuring your own heartbeat. In bed hours later, candle stub flickering low, you replay the evening. The impossible shimmer of Lucrezia's gown, Cesari's silent arithmetic, the way almond hovered ghost-like on the air. You realize the banquet was never about food, not even about poison. It was theater, an opera of uncertainty designed so that every guest carried home a personal aria of fear and fascination. That melody follows you into dreams, a reminder that power often hides behind velvet curtains and courtesies sweeter than wine. And somewhere, beyond your slumber's edge, a jester still laughs, because in the grand mask of history, the wisest voice may come from the fool who warns us. Trust nothing that glitters, and sip carefully whatever is offered in a golden cup. You arrive in Rome just in time to catch the newest swirl of whispers. A cardinal who dared challenge the Pope's latest land grab coughed once over a silver chalice, complimented the vintage, and never woke the next morning. A Florentine banker who disputed Cesari's financing finished his toast, rode home humming, and evaporated from every ledger in Italy. One jittery noble even hired a food taster. Folklore says the poor man tasted, nodded, and toppled before the bread reached the table. No one proves these tales, yet no one dismisses them either, and that uncertainty is precisely where Borgia authority takes root. You learn to study every vessel set before you. People swear Lucrezia Borgia wears a ring hollowed for powdered toxins, a single flick of her wrist enough to drag an enemy into eternity. Others insist Cesare keeps a gem-studded flask of liquid death in his doublet, arsenic laced with something darker. Whether either device exists is beside the point. The possibility alone bends spines. Poison needn't strike to serve its master. It can simply hover in rumor, turning each sip into roulette and each guest into a docile conspirator. The lesson crystallizes: survival at a Borgia table is not about the sharpest wit or the richest gift. It is about waking up the next dawn with your heartbeat intact. If one soiree etched itself deepest into Europe's collective nightmares, it was the October revelator dubbed the Banquet of Chestnuts. Contemporary diarists, none more quoted than the meticulous Johann Burchard, claim 50 courtesans, chosen for flawless beauty, drifted through the papal apartments that night. As music swelled, servants tossed roasted chestnuts across polished floors. The women crawled on hands and knees to retrieve them with their teeth, while clerics in velvet caps and nobles in crimson hose wagered on the spectacle. Whole roast hogs glazed in honey, mountains of sugared figs, and flagons of spiced wine paraded through incense haze until the room blurred into a living fresco of candlelight and sin. Shock sells stories, so details grew monstrous in retelling. Prizes for virility measured like jousting scores. Lucrezia supervising from a balcony, Pope Alexander applauding beside silver platters piled with discarded gowns. How much is true? Historians wrestle with Burchard's relish for scandal, yet the very plausibility indicts the House of Borgia. Even an embroidered half-truth reveals a court confident enough to parade vice beneath frescoes of saints. More chilling than the indulgence is the address on every invitation: the Vatican. These feasts unfolded inside Raphael-painted corridors where crucifixes caught candlelight and marble apostles guarded the walls. Rodrigo Borgia understood optics. If he could mortgage heaven's throne room for an evening of excess and still wear the keys of St. Peter next sunrise, then limits were illusions. Cardinals recited matins by dawn and clinked goblets with courtesans by dusk, their red hats bobbing beside mercenaries, poets, spies. Sanctuary became stagecraft, holiness became backdrop, and the message to Rome was unmistakable. Papal power is what we declare it, and tonight we declare it unstoppable. Foreign envoys could not refuse a seat, for absence courted suspicion worse than any poison. Yet presence carried its own hazards: a careless laugh, a half-finished cup, a lingering stare at Lucrezia's golden hair might stitch your name into Cesari's mental ledger. He moved through the revel like a chess master disguised as a spectator, seating rivals elbow to elbow, prodding hidden hatreds until sparks flew, then using the distraction to ink private treaties in a shadowed alcove. By the time dessert glistened, pomegranate seeds suspended in amber sugar, one envoy discovered his reputation in tatters, another his border fortress promised to protective papal troops. Outside these corridors, Europe gasped yet imitated. The spectacle of power draped in velvet and vice-inspired playwrights, pamphleteers, and tavern singers. They turned rumor into cautionary fables, fueling the Borgia mystique long after the last chestnut rolled beneath a cardinal's shoe. Even when reforms swept Rome and stricter popes scoured the papal apartments, echoes of that night lingered in every court jester's barb and every whispered toast. You close your eyes and almost taste almond in the back of your throat. You picture saints gazing down while dancers spin, chandeliers dripping wax like slow applause, Lucrezia smiling as if privy to tomorrow's headlines, Cesari's silence louder than trumpets. Somewhere a cork pops, somewhere else a quill scratches a ledger, and you realize the essence of Borgia strategy. Blur delight with dread until neither can exist without the other. So when your own goblet is raised at some distant banquet, remember this lesson carved under candlelight in the Vatican's heart. Power often arrives in the guise of hospitality, and the deadliest venom may be nothing more than the fear that it could lurk in the next sip. Let that awareness settle in your mind like a final, lingering note of lute song, unseen, but impossible to forget as you drift towards sleep. You step into the Vatican's torchlit corridor long after the last toast fades, and a single truth presses against your ribs. Every raised eyebrow from Cesare, every velvet whisper from Lucrezia, can tilt empires. For seasons it works. The Borgias reign by shock and spectacle, daring anyone to call their bluff. But candles always gutter, music always falters, and even the most extravagant feast must face the dawn. You feel that turning point like a chill breeze. Reformers across Europe seize the swirling rumors, papal orgies, chalices laced with cantarella, and hurl them like flaming arrows. How can the vicar of Christ feast while Christendom groans? They cry. Yet outrage is exactly the gamble Rodrigo Borgia perfected. Rules so brazenly that fear freezes dissent. It holds until the first cracks spider through the veneer. Inside each banquet, attention hums beneath the laughter. Guests understand the silent ledger. Tonight's seating chart can crown a prince or erase a lineage. A swaggering duke might bask in Lucrezia's honeyed greeting, dine like Apollo, then disappear into polite illness 3 days later. A cardinal who blocks the Pope's new alliance smells almond in his wine and retires early, forever. Even those spared the poison suffer its ghost. Every goblet becomes a coin flip between survival and legend. The genius is psychological. Refusing wine insults the host. Draining it might doom you. So you smile, sip, and wonder whether your future has been quietly bartered while you admired the chandeliers. Fear sharpens etiquette better than any etiquette manual. Rome's elite learn the game quickly. A noblewoman critical of Lucrezia shares one dance beneath frescoed angels, and is soon married off to a cousin with fatal hunting habits. A Spanish envoy vocally hostile to Alexander's claims dozes peacefully after supper. Cold by sunrise, lips ink black, the city whispers. Coincidence? But around Caesarea, coincidence feels choreographed. Then comes the banquet no one forgets, the chestnut affair. Whether half myth or whole truth, its imagery sears Europe's imagination. Candlelight glinting on bare skin, clergy wagering on crawling courtesans, a pope applauding sin beneath saint-painted ceilings. Even if Burchard's lurid diary inflated details, the story spreads because it could be true. That plausibility alone scorches papal dignity like spilled wine on silk. By 1503, the spell unravels. Alexander, aging but still audacious, shares a late summer meal. Some say the wine meant for another. Father and son stagger hours later, fevered and vomiting. The Pope, man who blurred sanctity and spectacle, dies within days. The hunter, caught by his own snare. Cesare survives, scarred in body and influence. French captains he once commanded now weigh new loyalties, and Italian princes smell weakness. Within 4 years he bleeds out on a Spanish hillside, far from the gilded halls where a mere nod once shifted borders. Curiously, Lucrezia endures. She slips from Rome's stage into a northern duchy, cultivating piety, patronage, and a library whispered to hold more secrets than any poison ring. Did she repent, or simply perfect the art of camouflage? The question itself fuels her afterlife in rumor. A siren turned duchess, forever half saint, half shadow. Yet long after their chairs sit empty, the Borgias' feasts keep feasting on imagination. Diplomats caution successors with tales of almond-scented death. Playwrights pen villains who smile over chalices. Opera stages thunder with choruses calling for Borgia wine. Every April, carnival masks recall Cesari's smug silhouette. Every thriller that centers on a whispered toxin tips its hat to Cantarella. And you, centuries removed, still taste that legacy each time satire slices a president's ego, each time a meme topples a titan with laughter sharper than steel. The Borgias taught the world that opulence can be a weapon, that fear served in silver bowls conquers without armies, and that power's bravado often masks its brittleness. So, as sleep edges in, picture the banquet hall abandoned. Rose petals crushed underfoot, goblets overturned, wax cooling on marble. In that hush, one last question hovers like candle smoke. Did we witness a triumph of authority or its desperate final performance? History suggests both. Power strutted in embroidered slippers and slipped on its own spilled wine. Let that image guide you into dreams where chandeliers dim and perfumes fade, yet lessons linger. Remember how uncertainty can command obedience, how spectacle can cloak decay, and how the faintest hint of poison, even if never poured, can silence a room. And when morning light returns, carry the quiet certainty that no throne, however dazzling, stands forever. Somewhere, beyond the edge of every empire, the candles are already sputtering. You wake beneath a drift of heather-scented mist, listening to curlews cry across a valley where no castle towers, no sheriff's trumpet sounds, only the heartbeat of kin and cattle. This is early medieval Ireland, an island stitched together by clans rather than crowns, by memory rather than parchment. Here a stranger's accent matters less than the lineage carved into his name, and the word law conjures not iron bars but the soft tread of a mediator stepping between feuding cousins. They call that mediator a brihin. Imagine a quarrel crackling like turf fire, a drunken shove outside the ring fort, a forearm snapped, pride bruised. In feudal Europe, someone might vanish into a stone keep's dungeon, the king's justice measured in chains. But under brihin custom, the offense is a tear in communal fabric, and tears must be mended, not widened. So the injured man's can summon a brihin, part jurist, part bard, a living archive trained since childhood to carry centuries of precedent in rhyme and rhythm. He arrives with no guards, no gavel, only a reed pen tucked behind one ear and the weight of his own reputation. By flickering hearthlight, both families recite their pedigrees, who married whom, which ancestor saved cattle in the famine of long ago. Every syllable helps the brihin gauge honor price, the compensation that will balance the scales. Perhaps 7 milk cows and a silver brooch, perhaps a fine cloak dyed with foreign woad. If the offender cannot pay, his siblings and uncles will, for kinship weaves responsibility like wicker round a basket. Justice, here, is restorative. Silver in the victim's hand, dignity returned to the aggressor once the debt is met, and the village spared a cycle of revenge. You realize the subtle genius. Punishment without prisons, authority without armies. A brihin's rulings carry weight only because people believe them. Should he favor bribes or falter in logic, clans will walk away to consult another sage on the next hill. Trust, not force, is the hinge of the whole design. Rival brihins compete like poets at a festival. Each judgment must sing with fairness or be forgotten. Wander farther and you see how fluid the code becomes. A bondmaid mistreated may claim compensation. A poet harassed on the road can demand a harp's worth of payment. For words are prized as cattle. Land is held in common by the tuath, the tribe. Exile, not execution, awaits the rare soul who refuses all amends. Even the High King at Tara, draped in crimson and gold, bows to this lattice of local statutes. For a monarch who ignores customary law risks looking kingly in name alone. At night, the brihins gather in oak-shadowed clearings, trading complicated verses that describe eye-for-eye values of everything from a dog's torn ear to an insult tossed at Imbolc. They speak of sick maintenance, the duty to shelter and feed an injured foe until he heals, because a half-mended enemy is more perilous than a healed neighbor. They recount cases where marriage bonds dissolve like morning frost if cruelty seeps in, or where foster parents outrank blood in matters of inheritance. Every tale reinforces a single thread. Peace costs less than feud. You glimpse the system's quiet checks, because justice is portable, lodged in memory, walking on 2 legs. No warlord can lock it inside a treasury. Because rulings rely on consent, even a chieftain drunk on power must bargain with consensus or face ridicule framed in satire. A punishment worse than exile for any leader who values honor. And because every individual is cradled by kin, none stand truly alone. Debts ripple outward, knitting the valley tighter each time. Centuries later, parchment and foreign swords will arrive. Norman writs sealed with wax, English sheriffs clanking in mail, declaring this oral web primitive. Yet the old ways linger in hedgerow whispers, in proverbs about debts paid in cattle, in songs that praise a just brihin whose tongue could still a spear. Modern courts echo faintly when they speak of restitution, mediation, community service. The roots reach back to these mist-blue mornings. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine that broken-armed farmer receiving his recompense. Silver pieces glinting like small moons, a promise that the insult to his body and name is healed. Hear the brihin's measured verse sealing the agreement. Hear neighbors exhale as tension lifts from their fields like morning fog. In that hush you sense a truth our steel-barred world often forgets. Justice can be a loom, not a lash. It can weave people closer instead of hammering them apart. So when you next sip water, remember the unseen code once carried only in human voices, proof that law need not roar to be strong. And as sleep folds over you, let the soft cadence of ancient judgments, equal parts poetry, memory, and mercy, guide you toward dreams where every conflict finds its balance, and every broken bond is mended under starlit skies. You wander across a patchwork of mossy hills where morning fog drapes every thorn hedge, and you feel it in the hush between skylark calls. Here, law breathes through people, not prisons. No iron-barred towers puncture the skyline of early medieval Ireland. No sheriff clangs a pike against a dungeon gate. Justice flows from soil and surname, carried on the tongues of kin who share the same sacred ground. And at the center of this living current stand the Brehons, walking bridges whose only armor is wisdom remembered in verse. Picture a tavern quarrel flaring into a broken arm. In other lands, the offender might rot behind stone walls, but the Irish clan sees the fracture as a rip in a communal cloak. A Brehon arrives, reed pen behind his ear, memory brimming with centuries of precedent. He faces the accused, the injured, every cousin and foster brother, and he measures honor price. 7 sleek cattle and a silver, filigree brooch, perhaps, enough to stitch the tear and let life carry on. No vengeance, no drawn-out trial. Debt paid, dignity restored, peace resealed like bark around a wounded oak. These roving jurists command no warriors. Their authority rests on reputation alone. If a Brehon's judgment tilts unfair, clans simply seek another voice on the next green ridge. So each decision must gleam with balance or be forgotten like last year's rain. Law by persuasion may seem fragile, yet for centuries it steadies a mosaic of tribes without need for gallows. Brehon logic prizes restoration over removal. Steal 3 cattle? Return 4. Damage a harpist's hand? Compensate him in silver equal to his music's worth. Kill a clansman? Pay the arraic. A blood fine calculated to acknowledge loss while damming the river of revenge. Refuse to pay and your kin shoulder the burden. Shun payment outright and find yourself exiled from firesides and marketplaces alike. A social death harsher than iron fetters. What startles travelers most is the reach of these protections. Women may own land, initiate divorce, reclaim their dowry if mistreated. Poets earn honor prices graded by poetic rank. Strike a blind man and face stiffer penalties than if you had harmed a lord's hunting hound. Even the poor cannot be fined beyond their means. Restitution might take the shape of labor, weaving, or a season's harvest instead of coins they do not possess. Power here is measured not merely in swords, but in a person's place within the clan tapestry, and every thread, however thin, strengthens the whole. The Brehon's courtroom is a clearing ringed by elders and curious children. There is no gavel's crash, only the cadence of story. Ancestors who settled similar quarrels, verses that spin law into memory's amber, genealogies recited until wrong and remedy click into alignment. When agreement finally lands, it lands like the first sunbeam of spring, warm, unquestioned, ordinary as breathing. Of course, this harmony relies on social glue. Break a promise, and gossip becomes a sword sharper than any king's decree. Fail to honor restitution, and neighboring clans refuse you livestock trade or marriage ties. Reputation is shield and currency. The system's genius is its speed. Injuries addressed quickly, debts counted in tangible goods, life nudged back on course before anger carves new scars. Across the sea, Norman scribes will scoff, quills dripping statutes onto parchment while castles sprout dungeons. Yet echoes of the Irish way ripple forward. Modern mediators speak of restorative justice. Psychologists praise reconciliation over retribution. They tread paths first walked by cloaked Brehons who knew that when people must share fields and rivers, peace is cheaper than triumph. So close your eyes and hear peat smoke drift above a thatched roof where 2 families, once at odds, now share honeyed oatcakes to seal settlement. The Brehon lifts his cup of buttermilk, satisfied. No shackles clang, no scaffold casts a shadow. Just the soft, sturdy knowledge that harmony, once broken, can be mended with fairness and a herd of cattle grazing quietly at dawn. Let that image guide your dreams tonight. Somewhere, under a rain-washed sky, a storyteller judge still recites the law by heart, trading punishment for balance, reminding us that justice, at its best, is less a hammer than a loom, patiently weaving torn edges into something whole again. You picture yourself seated at a rough-hewn table in a ring fort, the firelight catching the polished horn cups while elders haggle over dowries and honor prices as crisply as merchants tally coin. In early medieval Ireland, a wedding contract feels less like a church sacrament and more like a clan merger. Ledgers of cattle, slivers of silver, and ancestry recited until every cousin can trace the bloodline back to heroic myth. Under Brehon custom, there isn't one tidy definition of marriage. There are 10. Some bind equals who pool their flocks and divide them evenly if love sours. Others link a wealthy chief to a bride who safeguards her own cattle should parting arrive with winter's frost. Think prenup, but drafted in oat ink and judged by community memory rather than royal decree. Dowry and coibsh, bride price, travel both directions, yet neither spouse vanishes into the other's shadow. Should they separate, each reclaims the wealth they carried in, and any jointly earned calves are split by pre-agreed fraction. 15 cows here, 10 there, 2 held as surety against later quarrels. Infertility, neglect, chronic unfaithfulness. Each grants legal grounds for dissolution, decided not by priests but by Brehons who weigh evidence like seasoned traders weigh hides. These roving jurists also set the value of your very name. Under Brehon law, every soul possesses an honor price, a living appraisal of social worth. It isn't minted in gold but earned in reputation. Poets, master smiths, chieftains, and Brehons themselves command tall figures. Free farmers claim modest yet meaningful sums. If someone strikes you, slanders your lineage, or steals your sheep, compensation matches your honor price. Should you be the offender, your debt climbs in proportion to the station of the injured party. Defame a blind minstrel and, though swordless, his poetic stature might cost you more cattle than you own. Honor prices rise through bravery, artistry, loyal service. They plummet with lies or repeated insults. False testimony rips a hole in your legal standing. Drop low enough and your word in future disputes is worth less than an anvil dent. Gossip here isn't idle. It can bankrupt your dignity. All of this springs from 3 pillars: land, cattle, kinship. Land is communal, inherited in rotating strips among kin. Cattle are movable currency, clinking with milk and status. Kinship is the glue that makes every bargain stick. When wrongdoing occurs, it wounds an entire network. So restitution flows through that network as well. A thief unable to repay watches his family shoulder the debt. A clan protecting a chronic troublemaker finds trade doors slamming shut. Social pressure, not iron chains, keeps order. Women occupy this web not as silent footnotes but as negotiators with legal voice. A wife may own property, sue for divorce, and claim her share of the herd after separation. Some marriages grant equal authority over assets from day one. All recognize her independent honor price. Even the poorest craftsmen, the disabled, and itinerant bards carry protections. A bard's tongue is as shielded by law as a warrior's spear arm, for if culture dies, so does communal soul. Step back and the system resembles a living economy of trust. No prisons, no gallows, yet harmony holds because every agreement reverberates across dinner fires and harvest fields. To wrong a neighbor is to bruise the clan's face. To repair that bruise is cheaper than feuding through generations. Justice moves quickly. Dispute, Brehon ruling, payment. Then the world continues, patched rather than scarred. So when castles elsewhere grow taller and dungeons deepen, Ireland proves a quieter thesis. You can govern by reputation instead of fear, by cattle instead of chains. And as you drift towards sleep, imagine a moonlit gathering where rival families pass cups of mead after settling a blood fine. Cattle low softly in the dark, and a Brehon's calm voice closes the matter with a final, binding verse. Balance restored, tribe intact, night wind carrying only peace. You stride across a ragweed meadow where rain-washed stones mark the edges of grazing plots, and you feel how land, cattle, and kin bind the island tighter than any royal scroll. In early Ireland, no parchment deed stamped a single owner's name on a field. Soil belonged to the fine, the wider kin group. Live inside the ring fort and you plow the clan's strips. Stray too far or marry out and the right to sow vanishes like breath on a cold dawn. Land is less commodity than membership card, proof you belong. Wealth therefore moves. Cattle throng every settlement, walking dowries, living savings, mobile peace treaties. A bruise earns 1 cow. A broken rib, perhaps 5. Kill a prized bull and expect a herd to change hands before sunrise. Each transaction sends animals trotting from one buyer to another, circulating obligation, sealing apologies, and ensuring nobody hoards for long. Give cattle and you do not shrink your fortune. You weave yourself deeper into the island's safety net. Kinship stitches this system together. Your deeds rebound on cousins you have never met. Their debts rebound on you. Steal a neighbor's sheep and your uncle helps repay, not out of pity but duty, because his honor price is lashed to yours. Under Brehon eyes, wrongs are clan storms, not private squalls, and only full repayment calms the clouds. So when a Brehon hears a case he listens for 3 beats. Whose ground felt the trespass? Whose herd took the hurt? Which kin must shoulder the remedy? The answers guide his ruling, not to isolate a culprit but to realign the social constellation. Where feudal codes swing a sword, Brehon law sets a balance. Theft brings double or triple restitution, object plus compensation for the breach of trust. A clan contemplating larceny weighs not only the thief's risk but the collective shame and expense. Assault triggers a living tariff list. A black eye carries one price, a shattered tooth another, each scaled by the victim's standing. Homicide demands the heroic, a blood fine broad enough to acknowledge loss yet prevent the revenge spiral that could swallow entire valleys. Payment is public contrition. Silver, cattle, and the killer's kin standing bareheaded before the mourners. It stings, but it stanches further blood. Justice here moves swiftly. No jails to feed, no trials that drag on for winters. Dispute, mediation, settlement, life resumes. The guilty stay inside the community, reminded daily of the debt they paid and the harmony they helped restore. While castles on the continent rise around torture chambers, Ireland's code surprises with protections. Women may inherit land, divorce husbands who neglect them, and reclaim their dowry cows. Artisans and poets carry honor prices reflecting skill, not birth. Even a blind harper cannot be struck without incurring a heavier fine than bruising a petty lord's arm. For song is prized as much as sword. Reputation, in this moral economy, is hard currency. Each soul wears an invisible price tag calibrated by deeds. Insult someone, call him a liar in the alehouse, and you might owe a heifer. Repeat slanders and your own honor price drops, dragging your credibility down with it. Yet valor or loyal service can lift that value, letting a common plowman rise in legal worth as surely as a chieftain rises by conquest. For a millennium this weave of consensus holds. But tides shift. Norman knights land in the 1100s, hauling feudal charters that speak of absolute lords and prison keeps. They dismiss Brehon custom as rustic softness. Justice without shackles cannot be real. English monarchs follow, labeling Gaelic law dangerous, and worse, pagan. Decrees in Tudor and Stuart eras strip Brehons of authority. Judgments that once echoed in oak groves are branded treasonous. By the 17th century, the oral code lies officially outlawed. Yet outlawry cannot erase memory. Farmers still quote verses on cattle fines under their breath. Poets tuck honor price jokes into laments. Village mediators quietly broker restitutions when crown courts seem too distant or too dear. The harp string may fray, but its note lingers. Tonight, as you settle beneath a wool blanket, imagine that old clearing. 2 feuding families facing one another. A Brehon reciting lineage until tension softens. Cattle lowing nearby like punctuation marks in the dusk. No gallows tower overhead. Only stars silently rating every deed. Let that vision cradle you to sleep. A reminder that law can be stitched from trust instead of terror, and that sometimes the surest path to peace is neither dungeon nor duel, but the steady, humble exchange of one cow for one cracked rib under the watchful eyes of a caring clan. You ride a narrow bareen at dusk, puddles glinting like spilled pewter, and feel the air shift. London's parchment justice has crossed the sea. In Dublin, English judges don powdered wigs and decree that only prisons, hangings, and royal seals count as real law. Overnight, the Brehon, once welcomed like a healer, becomes a criminal with a quill. Gaelic chiefs who still trust cattle fines are branded traitors. Clan meadows once used for restitution are seized as forfeit estates. Yet as the gavel echoes in stone courthouses, something older keeps breathing out on the bog-rimmed frontiers. In the west, a cracked barley barn hosts midnight arbitrations. Two families arrive by lantern, place a single cowhide between them, and let a gray-bearded storyteller measure honor price in whispered verse. Coins may now clink in colonial coffers, but here a shoeless boy still counts restitution on his fingers while elders nod. A handshake in torchlight settles what a crown decree might drag through months of costly procedure. The Brihin is officially gone, yet villagers keep his cadences alive, as quietly stubborn as fox tracks in morning frost. Centuries turn. Steam engines replace horse carts, and Ireland awakens beneath a different flag. Scholars in Tweed begin sifting vellum fragments, surprised to find restorative justice theories sketched in 9th century glosses. Activists cite those same clauses, repair over revenge, community over cages, when arguing against mass incarceration. Mediation circles in Galway primary schools teach children to pay the honor price. An apology spoken aloud, help with chores, a promise recorded in front of peers. Across the Atlantic, facilitators studying gang truces quote early Irish maxims about closing the wound or widening the quarrel.